This is a commentary on the park and ride scheme, essentially narrated PowerPoint slides of the solution. What I suggest that you do whilst you're looking at the network diagram that's given here is that you also have in front of you the exercise sheet for the park and ride exercise, which actually contains the precedence diagram, because it's useful to look at the precedence diagram, the diagram that tells you the list of activities, what the sequence is, i.e. what the predecessor for each activity is, and the timings that are given there. Now, the first thing you have to do when you're developing an activity on node network is you have to draw out the network itself, the logic and the sequence. So we can see first of all that in this particular project the first activity is the survey, activity A. So we've inserted that on the left hand side as the starting point, and in activity on node you can not just put the letter, the identifying letter or number if you want, but also you can put a little description in the node. That really helps you to understand what this project is about. And then if we have a look at this, we can see that once you've finished activity A, activities B, C and D can all start. If you look at the precedence table that was given on the exercise sheet, you will see that the soils report, the traffic design and the parking lot layout, the initial design work on that, could actually be produced and could start, I should say, once you have finished activity A. Activity A is the immediate predecessor to all three of those. So if you look at the network, you will see that B, C and D each follow the survey and can be conducted in parallel. Activity E is the approving of the design. So activities B, C and D is where that initial design is all approved. You have to complete the soils report, the traffic design and the lot layout for the car park before you can then approve all of these. Clearly you can't approve the designs until you've done the basic designs. Okay, so those all feed into activity E. But after activity E, 4 activities can then start. So this is the more detailed design of the illumination or the street lighting, if you like, the drainage, the landscaping, and also the signing. These are things like road signs, direction signs and so on. So those 4 activities can all be done in parallel. This is where we're actually writing up the bid proposal for the park and ride scheme. Once you have done those activities, then you find the big bid proposal can only be written and produced once you have completed those 4 activities. So it all comes together into a final activity, which is pulling it all together into the bid proposal. So that is the initial logic. You'll see that we've just left the letters in for earliest start time, ES, earliest finish time, EF, and the duration on the top of each node. And then at the bottom of each node, in the bottom sections, we have the latest start time, the latest finish times, and also TF, which stands for the total float, which is the days of slack, or the number of days flexibility that you have. This will all become clear as we then move through the next sections. Okay, so what we will now move on to is actually inserting the activity times. So we have the activity times listed and inserted in there for each of those activities. These are just taken directly off the precedence table that you should have in front of you. And if we move on from here, we can then do the forward pass. So we now move on to the forward pass. So if I open up the diagram, you can see there is the network, and we've inserted the earliest start and earliest finish times across the top. So starting with activity A, the survey, we can see that the start is of course day 0 of the project. It takes 5 days So the top right hand quadrant is 5. This is the earliest you can finish the survey. So that 5 then carries forward to activities B, C and D. The earliest you can finish the survey is the earliest you can start those other activities. So 5 is inserted into each, and if we go across there, the soils report, activity B, earliest start is 5, it takes 20 days, so the earliest you can finish is 25. Traffic design the same, the earliest you can finish is 35, and the lot layout, the earliest you can finish is day 10. Now when we move forward to approving the design, which follows on from that initial design work of the earlier activities, you can see that we have to determine what the earliest start time is. Now none of those activities, the approved design activity cannot start until all of B, C and D are complete, and we will see that the earliest that C can complete is 35. So on the forward pass we take the higher value of those. So because C won't be finished until day 35, that's the earliest in which you can start the approval process for the design. The approval process takes 80 days, so the earliest finish using the expected timings for the design approval, activity E, is 115 days, or day 115. Clearly then the next 4 activities run in parallel: illumination, drainage, landscaping and signage. And so what we get there is that 115, day 115 is the earliest you can start any of those activities. And if you run through, then you can add the duration time for each activity to the earliest start time to get to the earliest finish time. So the earliest finish times for the activities F to I respectively are 130, 145, 140, 135. And then finally the final activity is to produce the bid proposal. The earliest that can start is day 145, because that's the earliest that you can finish the other 4 activities. Drainage is the one that doesn't finish until day 145, so that becomes the earliest start time. The bid proposal takes 10 days, and so the earliest you can finish the bid proposal is day 115. So this becomes the earliest finish time using the timings you've got for the whole project. Having completed the forward pass, where we work out the total time to complete the project, and for each activity the earliest start and finish times, we're now going to do the backward pass, which will give us some information about the project. It will help us to identify the latest start times and finish times for each activity. It will help us to identify the critical path, that route of activities through the network where we can't have any delay if we want the project to finish on time. And it will also identify any activities which have a degree of slack or float. In other words, where we have some flexibility. We don't always have to start them at the earliest time. So if we start with bid proposal on the activity J, and we look at the latest finish time, we can see that the earliest finish time is 155. So we're going to think of that as the date when we want to actually finish the project as a whole. So we write 155 into the bid proposal in the bottom right hand quadrant. That's the latest finish time. We then want to work out from that what the latest start time would be for the bid proposal activity to ensure the project finishes on time on day 155. So it's 155 minus the time for the activity, which is 10 days, which equals 145. So you'll see 145 written in the bottom left hand quadrant, which is the latest start time for the bid proposal. That's the latest we can start that activity and ensure that the project is finished on time in 155 days. We then work backwards from there to calculate the latest finish times for the preceding activities. So you see that activities F, G, H and I all have to finish on day 145 or sooner. In other words, that's the latest finish time for all 4 of those preceding activities. So that gets written in to the bottom right hand quadrant as the latest finish time, and then for each of those activities we subtract the activity duration from 145 to give us the latest start times. So you will see that for illumination, for the street lighting, it's day 130. For drainage, it's 115. For activity H, landscaping, it's 120. And for signing the signs for the park and ride scheme, it's day 125. That's the latest we can start that activity without putting the project back as a whole. Now clearly we then work back from there, and the preceding activity to all 4 of those was the approval of the design, activity E. And we will see that the latest we can finish that approval process to keep the project on time is 115. So 115 gets written into the bottom right hand quadrant. That's because if we delay that any longer, that puts activity G behind time, because activity G has to start on day 115. It's the latest start time, otherwise the project is put behind time. So again, approved design takes 80 days, and that means that the latest we can start that activity, the approval process, is on day 35. And we work back in the same way. That latest start time for E becomes the latest finish times for the preceding activities B, C and D. So again, that's written in. I won't go through every single activity there, but we see that when we work backwards from there, the latest finish time for the survey, activity A, will be 5, and because that is the latest we can start the traffic design, activity C, and we take away 5 days from the latest finish time to come to a latest start time of day 0. So clearly we need to start the survey on time, the first activity, because if we delay that right at the start, it will put us behind schedule for the rest of the project. The only other thing that's added into that diagram is the slack time, or the float time. This is the amount of flexibility, or if you like, the number of days we can delay starting that activity but still complete the project on time. So you can see for activity A, the survey, there is no slack. We need to get that started straight away. But for the soils report, we do have some flexibility. Activity B, there's a slack of 10. In other words, the earliest we can start is day 5, but actually we can delay it until day 15 and still complete the project on time. So there's 10 days of slack there. Activity C, traffic design, again that has no slack. The latest finish time, the latest start time is the same as the earliest start time. So in other words, we need to get that underway straight away. And then if we look at lot layout, activity D, there's quite a lot of flexibility there. There's 25 days of slack. So actually we have quite a lot of flexibility there. We can choose to start that as late as day 30 and still complete the project on time. So we work through there, working through the slacks. Once we've worked out that, we can move on and we can start thinking about identifying the critical path. So this next slide identifies the critical path, and the critical path is where there is no flexibility, where there's no slack, where there's no float, as it's sometimes called. In other words, along this path A, C, E, G, J, that's where all the activities need to start and finish on time. Any delay on the critical path will put the project behind. This is why it's called critical. things must be done in that time. So if we delay any activity by a day on that route, on that path, that actually puts the project behind. Or likewise, if we want to reduce the time of the project, those are the activities where we might look to try and save some time, because a day saved on the critical path means that we actually save a day on the project overall. The other activities are non-critical, but of course it doesn't mean we have infinite flexibility. If you delay some activities, it might be that they suddenly become critical in themselves. Okay, so it is dynamic when you're going through the project, and you must ensure you don't take your eye off the non-critical activities. The non-critical activities also enable us to shift our resources around, smooth out our use of people or equipment and so on through the project. So that gives us some flexibility. It means that we don't, the normal thing is that you don't have to start every single activity at the absolute earliest that you can do it.